Hey friends, in honor of this month's dynamic T-square, I thought I'd break down one part of that aspect that comes with a fair amount of drama, Mars square Saturn. Since these two planets are described as correlating with a lot of life's difficulty in our astrological tradition, it's no wonder that people get a little stressed out when considering them when they're in aspect to each other. But as Rob Hand has said, no planet is essentially benefic or malefic. It's our relationship to these energies that makes an impact one way or the other, and he says it takes some consciousness and intention to get to some of their positive potentials with the malefic planets Mars and Saturn. Saturn can correlate with restriction and limitation, and Mars with aggression and drive. With some awareness though, we can turn a limitation into a strength or asset, and we can also channel our aggression into positive pursuits. Things get really interesting when we start to blend these two energies. For instance, Mars can be impulsive, while Saturn can put on the brakes or say no. It's not hard to imagine how slowing down can have a positive impact though. Let's say we're tapped into what we want and we're ready to move forward, that's our Mars, but we hit a roadblock, Saturn.
You shall not pass!
Even if we feel impatient, a Saturnian limitation might be just what causes us to slow down enough to avoid the mistakes of impulsiveness. Maybe that limitation is just enough to get us to see our desire in a new light, and some adjustment on our part in response to that limitation has us move forward in a direction that's even better for us. When Mars and Saturn come together, we can take deliberate action rather than impulsive action. Of course, we can just push against our Saturn with our Mars and get really aggro and frustrated. And if you find yourself in that very predicament, there's a loud signal coming through to stop and take a closer look at what's blocking you. Maybe there's an important message there. If we slow down and turn our frustration into deliberation, we may put ourselves in an even better position for success down the road. With every astrological symbol, it's worth learning about the positive and negative expressions so that you can recognize where you're at on that continuum at any given moment, and then make a more informed choice about how to respond. A lot of times we need some outside perspective from others to see things clearly, even if that's coming through some negative energy directed our way. But there's still a lot we can develop consciousness around on our own. Let's say we have a lot of fire and we're pretty impulsive in general. We can learn to spot the signs of moving too quickly, both inside and outside ourselves, and then recognize that in the moment so that we can then make a new choice. The idea isn't to become less impulsive, it's to recognize our impulsiveness so that we can be present with it and then choose rather than just react. We might feel impatient and still slow down. Yeah, it's not the best feeling, but a few blunders due to impatience teaches us that it's sometimes beneficial to develop some presence and awareness about it and make a different choice in the moment. One positive Mars quality we can work to develop is courage, which some people mistakenly think of as the absence of fear. That's not really courage. Courage is feeling scared shitless and walking into that burning building anyway to rescue someone. So Mars has to do with fear and adrenaline. Saturn has to do with fear too. The fear of things going wrong or going badly, or the fear of failure or negative outcomes. So Mars aspecting Saturn turns up the volume on fear in a big way. For the Mars piece, being present with the fear and taking stock of our motivations is helpful. And for Saturn, sometimes just naming that worst case scenario and then also naming what we do if that happened is all we need to shift our experience. This aspect asks, what are you really afraid of and what are you going to do about it? Some of us respond to fear by trying to repress it, but that doesn't tend to work out as a long-term strategy. It seems to be a better bet to face our fear and make a plan. Again, this doesn't mean that we get rid of our fear. It means we work with it, we use it, we get to know it. Saturn asks for a plan and Mars asks for action.
That's it. That's the plan. Period.
When you say it like that, it's pretty easy to see how beneficial these planets can be to each other. But let's take that another step further. Let's say we get clear about what we're afraid of and we make a plan and then we take that first step forward and boom, a major conflict emerges. Or we find ourselves facing that worst case scenario that we just imagined. Facing our fear doesn't guarantee that things are going to turn out the way we want, but it does guarantee that we build character and maybe stamina and fortitude. If we have this aspect in our natal chart, there's a good chance that over time, these kinds of experiences turn into tenacity, which is a quality a lot of people respect. I once did a Google search for quotes using the word tenacity, and the entire first page of results were quotes from people who had natal Mars-Saturn aspects. When you face a conflict and you don't get your way, you have some choices. You can give up and walk away, you can stand and fight harder, or you could do both. You could walk away and regroup, rest and reflect, and then prepare for round two. Those folks who describe themselves as tenacious are probably in that last camp. Mars-Saturn aspects can describe starts and stops, progress and setbacks, and the stress of push-pull dynamics. But if we stay present and accept these kinds of energetics as our natural training ground, we can develop not only tenacity, but resilience. Let me rewind to this idea of giving up. This is an important one. Under a Mars-Saturn transit, we might face a pretty formidable roadblock, and the thing in our way might feel like something that we can't get around. That's Saturn. Or maybe we face a formidable competitor or enemy, and they're just putting everything they have into the fight against what we want, and we don't think we can win. That's Mars. Now, both of these energies can cause us to give up the fight before we should. In these moments, we need to ask ourselves, how bad do I really want this? Or is this really the thing I want? Or do I need to stop and take another look at that? Maybe this conflict's giving me some new information that'll see me adjust what I want so that there's really no longer a conflict with that particular person. Or maybe I get really clear that this is what I want, and I realize that part of the conflict was there because I wasn't projecting what I wanted with clarity and purpose. Maybe that new clarity helps me tap into my inner resources, and I go into round two and have a totally different outcome. Well, if you're watching this video in August 2024, we have a complex T-square aspect that includes Mars squares Saturn, but Mars is conjunct Jupiter while it squares Saturn and also Venus. And that reminds me of a chart I've spent some time with that has a resonant or similar T-square, and that's filmmaker David Lynch, who has natal Mars conjunct Saturn in Cancer, opposite Mercury and Venus in Capricorn, and square Jupiter in Libra. Mars rules his Scorpio ascendant, and Mercury rules his Virgo midheaven, and that tells us that that T-square is really formative in terms of his personality and his career. Mars is also out of bounds, but we'll save that for another time. For now, let's just zero in on the Mars-Saturn piece. Looking at Lynch's body of work, his films are full of aggression, violence, transgression, and repression. It's as if he's exploring the full range of potential in this aspect, but especially the negative potential. One of the most common themes in his films is a main character who's repressed some violent act and is coming to terms with that over the course of the film. Our squares are irritating in a way that we all want to do something about them. People born with squares don't tend to just resign themselves to feeling that tension. They try to resolve it. That's probably the main reason astrologers have noticed that people with T-squares, which by the way are made up of two squares in an opposition, tend to do great things with them. Lynch's characters struggle with themselves. They struggle with their actions and their responsibilities. They come to terms with their sexual desire or forces that might repress that desire. They also face off with characters who embody pure aggression or violence, and they face their fears as well as their own capacity for violence in the process. And in this way, Lynch doesn't exactly show us the most positive outcome of wrestling with the Mars-Saturn aspect, so that's not why I was talking about him today. A lot of people have described him as being better at asking interesting questions rather than providing answers. Instead, he gives us a window into what wrestling with those darker potentials of these energies can look like, at least in a completely dark fantasy realm that's a lot more like our dreams than our reality. It's more archetypal than literal, which is kind of perfect for a student of astrology, right? And speaking of students of astrology, now is a great time to join us in our astrologer training program where you can earn a diploma in professional astrology. Visit astrologyuniversity.com/program to learn more. When you sign up before August 24th in 2024, you can register with our best discount of 8 courses for the price of 9, and you'll get the benefit of joining a community of like-minded peers, which is one of the most common benefits that our students rave about. Our program courses come with live Q&A sessions almost every weekend, and over time you get to know the other students just as much as the instructors. You get to chat in real time with some amazing astrologers like Kelly Surtees and Demetra George, Mark Jones, and Saffron Rossi, and I'm there just about every weekend to help you navigate this sea of amazing insights and perspectives so that you can find your own voice as you learn to speak the healing and insightful language of astrology. If this sounds like something you're looking for, I'd love you to join us. Reach out to our help team if you want to schedule a call to find out if the program is right for you. Just email help@astrologyuniversity.com and they'll set you up. Well, I hope today's video has helped you reflect a bit on Mars-Saturn aspects, whether that's natally or by transit. And until next time, take good care.